If you want to actually create a business that can work without you and you don't have to be in it, but you can work on it, this is the blueprint that you need. If you want to take your tasks from being manual to being automated, if you want to take your team from being reactive to proactive, and if you want to replace chaos with consistency, all you need to do in your business is build the blueprint. So going into this is the blueprint, and this is how we build all of the blueprints in our business. It's how we build all of the blueprints that we teach to our clients. And it really is the difference between creating assets, even if they're intangible, and value in the company, and just turning up every day and being busy, throwing loads of energy at exercises, and just creating task after task after task. So what we're looking at doing here is going into our business and looking at all of the processes that we do and starting off with the highest volume tasks first. So what I mean by this is, if there's things that take place in your business that aren't currently automated and delegated, these are the things that I'm talking about. So have a think now about the things that you do in your business that take place every day, week, or month without fail, but aren't currently systemized. And what we're going to do is think, why do we actually need a blueprint for those? Well, the first thing is, imagine if the person who does that for you, it goes off sick or gets another job and hands in their notice. When the person walks out the door, so does the process. If it's even worse than that, and actually you're doing these tasks yourself, the reality is you don't know how you actually complete that task in many cases until you build a blueprint. In that blueprint, you'll refine that process. And then once the asset is actually created, you can then delegate it. So you can actually train somebody else and delegate it. You could actually get to a point where your team and new recruits are being trained on the blueprints that you created, and you've never even met the team member, let alone train them. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of companies around the UK that work using these blueprints that we've created, but we've never met the entrepreneur, we've never been in the business, we've never taught their team. But what we've done is taken that intellectual property, taken that expertise, created a blueprint and put it into practice. So think about those tasks first at the highest volume. And then what we're going to do is build the blueprint around it. So what I would do is get yourself a sheet of paper or a journal, and in the middle, write what the process is. So let's say, for example, this studio. I'm sitting in the studio, recording a podcast. So let's say podcast, let's just call it podcast process. In fact, we have a blueprint in Property Entrepreneur called the podcast process. And when we talk about using these blueprints and we teach them on Property Entrepreneur, we talk about set and forget. And what that means is that you set them and you can forget that process even exists. And we're over 200 episodes now. And since about episode, 30, 35, I figured out how it worked. I blueprinted it. I delegated it to one of our team. And now there's team members that I've never met, people that I didn't recruit, that run that process for us. And through 200 episodes, I couldn't even tell you how that process or blueprint works, but it was me that actually created it 2 years ago. But because I took the time to do it, blueprinted it, I delegated it to a team member. I don't know how it happens, but 200 episodes later, it means that I'm not involved in that. So take this piece of paper and in the middle, write the name of the blueprint. So in this case, the process or the podcast process. That's the name of what we're going to blueprint. And then what you want to do is mind map. So basically map out all the things that need to happen to get this podcast out into the world. So the first is preparation. I don't just roll into the studio having not prepared. There needs to be a preparation phase. There needs to then be the studio. So the studio needs to be set up. Came in this morning, the team have set all the studio up. That needs to take place. I then need to record it. I need to physically sit here and record it in the studio. And then I'm assuming needs to go to be edited, and they chop it up, top, tail it, listen to it, cut between the videos. They then want to create probably supporting assets, which would be show notes and thumbnails for YouTube, images for social media. Then it needs to go to the social media team who schedule it. Then it needs to go to the PAs and VAs who then actually post it, etc., etc. And there'll be all these different things that take place. And as you start to write it down, you'll think, oh, I forgot about, actually, we need to make sure that whatever, the studio lighting's correct. So that goes up there with studio. Oh, I need to make sure that we know if there's any guests because they need to be tagged in. Well, that'll go into the show notes. And you do this mind mapping exercise, which might take you 20 minutes. It might take you 2 hours. Depends how complicated the task is. But this mind map then will be basically downloading everything you know into data that's on this piece of paper. What you've then got is all the bits that go into doing this thing. And at the minute, if you don't have a process, it basically is you and your teammates running around doing this stuff just off the top of your head, or you remember it, or someone says, oh yeah, no, you do that, then I do this. It's inconsistent, it's prone to mistakes, there's no intangible asset value. And the worst thing is it's got a single point of failure. When one of those team members who's either part of the process or knows the process is not there, the whole thing collapses. So we want to move the value out of the process into the person and onto this sheet of paper. Then what we do is you've got all this information. You might have 20, 30, 40 different points on this sheet of paper. What you want to do is you want to consolidate it, because if you can't explain a process to a school pupil, to a child, to a 5-year-old, it isn't simple enough. And where people get this wrong is they then get all that information, then they go and write a 25-page operations manual about how to turn the lights on in the morning. And the reality is nobody reads it. If they do read it, they don't remember it, and it completely lacks effectiveness, but you think it makes you look clever because, wow, look at this, it's a 150-page operations manual. The aim of the game is to keep it simple. And when I owned Multilet UK, it took me 5 years to figure out how to run the property management department, but we ended up having a team of 6 or 7 property managers running hundreds of millions of pounds of property across 8 offices around the UK using a 4-letter acronym, which was NAIL, which was notes, action, inform, log. And that took me 5 years to create, but then we used to run hundreds of thousands of maintenance jobs a year using 4 steps. And every property manager used exactly the same blueprint, and it enabled us to have a world-class multi-let portfolio management maintenance department based on just 4 steps and 4 letters. The hardest thing is to keep this simple. And with all that information on the page, you want to reduce it down to between 3 and ideally no more than 6 steps or topics. So all those things I rattled off earlier, you would probably have prep, you would probably have studio, you would probably have shooting, you would probably have editing, you would have artwork, and then perhaps social media. How do you get all of them into minimum of 3, maximum of 6 categories and steps? And most of the blueprints that I build have 6 steps. And if you see the blueprints that we teach on Property Entrepreneur, pretty much all of them have 6 steps. So you want to identify what those 6 steps are and put those together. And then you've got, get rid of that piece of, or put that piece of paper to one side, get a clean sheet of paper. If you're, a bit more tech savvy, do it on your iPad, whatever. Get that piece of paper, and then basically in the middle of the paper, write podcast process. And then what we do is have a rectangle, like a PowerPoint slide. And in the middle, it says what the asset is, the podcast process. And then it has 6 steps, 3 along the top, 3 along the bottom. And you read it left to right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they're the 6 steps to the asset. What we want to do is give them names that summarize what it is, like the ones I just rattled off a minute ago: studio, social, prep. They're your 6 steps. And then what we need to do is all the other information that goes with it. So if we say, for example, studio, that involves the signage behind me. It involves 2 cameras. It involves the mic, the recording desk, the glass of water on the table, all of these individual bits. What you want to do is then consolidate again all those notes on that piece of paper, consolidate that down to 5 bullet points, maximum of 5, minimum of 3. And then what that does is gives you the 5 steps below the one topic. And then what you do is that gives you then your blueprint. And what you've then got is a simple blueprint that anyone can remember. There's 6 steps to it, maximum. You need to prep. You need to get the studio ready. You need to do et cetera, et cetera. And then the detail that goes with it, which is normally what you would either train people on or use as a supporting reference and resource would be the supporting detail. You don't need any more than that. So for each topic, 5 bullet points, and then that is the whole blueprint start to finish. That gives you the balance of keeping it simple, so anyone can understand in 6 steps when they're putting it together. Let's say your 6-step blueprint for writing a magazine article. Once you've done it the first time, you would have to look at the 6 steps. One would be the objective, the second would be the structure, the third would be the chapters, the fourth would be the case studies, the fifth would be the call to action, the sixth would be the reference points, for example. They would be your 6 steps. The first time you learn how to do a magazine article, you would understand the 6 steps. You would then also read the 5 bullet points for each step, which might be on a PowerPoint document. It might be on a video that you record on Loom or another software. It might be on an operations manual where you just have the 6 topics and then the 5 steps. The first or second time, you'd have to go through the whole thing because you'd have to remember you forgot the glass of water on the desk, or you forgot to add the lead magnets to the magazine article. You'd go through it in detail. But once you get through it and you do it enough, you understand what it all means. You wouldn't have to read all 30 individual bullet points. You would just read the headline 6 and say, right, 1, objective, right, 2, chapters, 3, content, 4, lead magnets, 5. You would just remember what they are, understand it, and it would just be a prompt. So that's the blueprint. You know, that is how you create a blueprint. That is the blueprint that we use to create our blueprints. We also call it the asset factory. So if we're building assets for the business, we call it the asset factory. If you wanted to supercharge this, you could use acronyms. So for example, we teach time tracking. So we teach people how to track their time using various softwares. In order for that to be a 6-step blueprint, we have an acronym, which is TOGGLE, T-O-G-G-L-E. And TOGGLE is actually the software that we use to time track. If you want to supercharge this, which gives it more sex appeal, makes it easier to remember, gives it a higher perceived value. Back in the day, you had to do it creatively. Nowadays, you can do it using ChatGPT. Would be to put those 6 steps in, which might be, like we said, prep, studio, social, etc. Put it into ChatGPT and say, create a 6-letter acronym using these 6 words that has something to do with social media. And after a few iterations, it will give you those words, and then it gives you an acronym, either an acronym, you know, as in like toggle, or you could do it, I forget what it's called, where you use like alliteration. So you might have like the 6 Ps, and you say to ChatGPT, give me 6 words that begin with P that explain each of these 6 topics. That would supercharge it for you. And then the other things you want to go with it is when you're blueprinting it and you want to actually train it to other people, whether that's your clients, your team members, is you want to give it some supporting resources. So supporting resources would be like, with this blueprint, also see the supporting resource, which might be the studio floor plan, which shows you have 2 cameras there, sign behind, rectangle desk, landscape in front of the speaker, etc., etc. So supporting resources, and then also case studies. It's a lot easier. So when we host our annual AGM events, what we do is we give them a template that we use at our AGMs, but then we also give them the Property Entrepreneur business plan. They know the company, they've got a copy of the blueprint, and as they go through and do their own, they can see exactly what ours looks like using that blueprint. So it makes it a lot easier because they're not just creating, or they don't have to rely on creating. They can also use it for reference and basically copy. And I actually do that with some of my social content. I'll look at the blueprint, I'll look at examples of ones we've previously done, and rather than start and recreate the wheel, I'll actually take a previous one and reword it. So where previously it might say, this is the 3 steps you need to know to achieve financial independence, I might take that case study and I might say, here are the 6 steps you need to know to to execute the blueprint to build your blueprints. You know, it's just making it easy and not having to remember anything. That is pretty much it. So that is the blueprint. Remember, there's a big difference between having a job and being self-employed and running around like a headless chicken and actually building a business. If you look at any of the businesses that I've built or I advise on, they're based on blueprints. They're based on assets, and the founders, the managing directors responsibility is to work on the business, not in it. Is working on processes and blueprints and laying these bricks perfectly, one brick at a time. Even the people that run my companies, that's what their primary focus is creating these assets, creating these blueprints, creating a job and then replacing a job, delegating it to somebody else. Hope you enjoyed that. That is the blueprint. And stay tuned for the next episode.